Nicozisis. He is a Certified Hippocrates Health Educator. He has been giving presentations on veganism throughout the world, and so we are very grateful to have him here this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so vappy to be here. That's vegan happy. Because when you're vegan, how can you compare regular happy with vegan happy? And not Wednesday because it's fasting day, right? But every other day of the week, the food is awesome. So us vegans, we are out to, and I've challenged people along the way, we need to create, instead of a lexicon, we need to create a vexicon. I have just returned from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I have been traveling for 6 months. I've been in 10 countries. I've been living in 6 cities, in large part, not completely, but in large part, to share the vegan message. And I have 6 more months to go. I'm going, on Monday I'm going to Argentina. I'm still a little jet lagged. It seems like I caught a little something on the airplane, so tonight I have my Barry White sexy voice going on. And I hope that works for you. You know, we're all gonna be sick here and there. We're all gonna die. It's just I don't want it to be my fault. So somewhere along the line it happened. So I'd love to say that I came back here to this by the way is like my Madison Square Garden. You know, to speak here at Wigmore Hall is for me just a thrill. It's a thrill if I can do the vegan version of that. And I'd love to say that I came back to speak with you, but really I came back because, as you may know, it's tax time. And I write the IRS, I email them, I call them. See where we're at? I call them, I tell them, please take me off your mailing list. And they don't listen. So I've been traveling, sharing the vegan message on a platform that's an organization called Remote Year. And what is Remote Year? I'll read you off of their website what they say that it is. It brings together a community of location-independent professionals from across the globe to spend a year working, traveling, and exploring 12 cities around the world. We spend 1 month in each city, and this community of ours will connect with local cultures and business ecosystems, forming lifelong, borderless, personal and professional relationships along the way. So I have already been, in October, it was Split, Croatia, Prague, Czech Republic, Lisbon, Portugal, Kyoto, Japan, Chiang Mai, Thailand, and I just came from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And so I put together a little video of the last 6 months. It's a montage, and it'll give you somewhat of a flavor of what it was like. There's no audio. So we're in Croatia, Prague, Portugal, Japan. And this is in Croatia, so we play, we work. Sometimes I play a little bit too much. My parents, my mom, and my sister came to visit Lisbon. We have meetings, we have town hall. It's like a community. It's like a family. That's me doing my paperwork in Japan. And I am a real estate owner, property owner, shopping center. That's one of our properties. In November, I was fortunate enough to travel with Dr. Will Tuttle and his wife to India to do a speaking tour. We had 15 events of 12 days, and we, in 12 days, went to 10 cities. I spoke at every one of those events. Looks like I'm singing there, but I'm actually speaking. And sometimes we had 800 people, sometimes we had 50 people. It just really depended on the promoter. Here I am in Tokyo, Japan, speaking at a small event, a vegan meetup. This is Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, being interviewed for an online magazine. And they put together brochures and they promote them on Facebook in the different cities that they're in. I even went to Kathmandu, Nepal. I was a keynote speaker at the Asian Pacific Vegetarian Congress, and they invited me back next year for Hong Kong. in Nepal. There I was. And wherever I am, I always try to find time to stay with my yoga practice because it tightens the screw loose brain. Always have to stay close to my yoga practice. And I like when it says fully booked. That was nice. This is in Zagreb, Croatia, the capital of Croatia. Oh, greetings from Lisbon, Portugal. There's a trolley. And I say, see you in Japan. So now we're flying to Japan, to Kyoto. And from Kyoto, Japan, I took the bullet train to go to Tokyo to speak to a group there. I'm getting on the bullet train. I'm very excited. It is a very cool experience, the bullet train. It would take 10 hours to drive from Kyoto to Tokyo, but instead it takes under 3 hours, about 2 hours and 45 minutes. And look how fast it goes. It's just flying. It's very well organized. And so I'm speaking here at one of the events. This is in Kyoto. And then of course I always find time for R&R. And so a few of us took an airplane 2 hours north of Kyoto to Hokkaido, the northernmost island, where we snow skied. It was awesome, about a foot of snow. Then we went to Chiang Mai, Thailand, completely different situation there. And I rented an apartment there, the Wildflower Home. Single young mothers, and they're seeking shelter. They live there. I came and I gave them a sprout workshop. So, and it never occurred to them not to cook the mung beans. So we soaked them. I came back the next day, and then we made a nice lunch. And so the big thrill on that experience was 2 weeks later, I get a text message from the director, and she said, "We're eating your mung beans and your sprouts." This is the text. This is what they were showing. So that was a big thrill for me. That I kept telling them, low cost, high nutrition. And that really resonated with them. Low cost, high nutrition. That's what the sprouts will do for the shelter. And then, of course, in Thailand, you got to go scuba diving. I'm a PADI dive master. I've been to 17 countries. Actually, this makes 18 countries. Scuba diving. And then always have to take care of business. I get DHL packages for my secretary and do some paperwork every week. Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, boy, the Vegetarian Association really put me to work in KL. I did 5 events there. This is in Penang Island. Look at the little baby. They love to give gifts. It's a gift-giving society in Asia. They will adorn you with flowers. They will give you plaques. They will give you certificates. And so, next up is Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and Mexico. Besides doing formal presentations, how many people have heard of the World Peace Diet by Dr. Woltella? So it's a New York Times bestseller. It's currently published in 16 languages. It's considered like the Bible of the modern vegan movement. And I assemble translation teams right now as we speak. They're translating the book in Czech. They're translating the book in Portuguese. And we just put together a group for Japan. So really what we're talking about is reaching a total of 150 million people by the time it's done. It should take about a year. So some of my observations from abroad. Europe, I spent 90 days in Europe. They love to drink wine and enjoy life. They don't want to work too hard. Now, the people in the developing countries, on the other hand, they're more eager to please, they're working harder, they're more deferential. The Czech Republic, people are afraid of risks. They want to keep their heads down, and they think us Americans have, especially in business, have this irrational optimism. And I was invited by the State Department in Prague to be on a panel about American entrepreneurship. And that was one of the things that came up. Uber is everywhere around the world. One of my observations is when the world figures out, the rest of the world figures out how to do special instructions, they will take a leap ahead over any other technological development that I can think of. What I mean by that is, for example, in Japan, everything's done by the book. There's no exceptions. There's no deviations. So if you want to go to a restaurant as a vegan and order a pizza, you say, yeah, give me the pizza, and it's not a language thing. They know what, you can get through the language. Bring me the pizza, but don't put the cheese on the pizza. No, we can't do that. Like, no, just don't put the cheese. No, we don't know how. We don't know how. And this is, we don't have a lot of time, but there's, I would keep a diary. So many examples of that, and it's cute. Asia, if I could sum it up in one word, it would be respect. In Japan, people are always, they're getting tired of me talking about Japan and how great it was, because everything was done perfectly right every time, on time, quietly, without any drama. But on the flip side, they don't have jokes. They told, when I gave presentations, when we met ahead of time, they told me, if you have jokes, just take your jokes out, because not only will they not understand, but if you explain the joke, they still will not understand it. And I said, oh, that's good, cultural differences, I'm all about that. So tell me some of your jokes. And to this day, I've asked a lot of people, no one can tell me what their jokes are. Now you turn on the TV, there's a lot of laughing and giggling going on, so they do have some kind of humor. Thailand is a land of smiles. It's a kind, easygoing culture. It's deeply spiritual. They are Buddhists. They are pro-Western. They're open-minded. They have a large expatriate community because they're so friendly to outsiders, but it's also very inexpensive to live there. Vegan choices are everywhere. It's a constitutional monarchy. There's no representative government. It's chaotic and less orderly, but it is a developing country. Does anyone recognize those twin towers? That's the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It's a small, young country. It's comprised of racially of Aboriginals, Chinese, and Indians. It's 70% Muslim. You can hear the call to pray in the shopping centers, the grocery stores, out on the street. They can marry up to 4 wives. It looks and feels like Miami. It's got the most beautiful, big, tall buildings, and somewhat you have still like the leftover of the British 3-story British colonial buildings. It's very vibrant. It's the size of New York. People entertain and they live their lives and they go about their recreation without alcohol. It's largely a non-alcohol drinking society. And the Muslims, which is most of the people, will only go to halal restaurants. They will not go to a restaurant if it serves alcohol. There's corruption at all levels of business and government, even in Thailand. Malaysia's had one-party rule for 70 years. Money. Everything's in the thousands. Whether we're talking about rupee, whether we're talking about ringgit somewhat, whether we're talking about yen, or whether we're talking about the Nepal rupee, or the Thai baht. Everything's in the thousands. And that's a different conversation, but there's reasons for that. It's law and order. These are law and order societies. You cannot speak badly of an elected official in some of these countries. You cannot take your money with the king's face on it and crumple it up, because that would be disrespectful to the king. You could be thrown in jail for something like that. There's vegan options everywhere across Asia. How many people use Happy Cow? Happy Cow is a great smartphone app. You can download it, and it's like Yelp for vegan. It tells you all the vegan restaurants in the area, and people rate the restaurants. So there's vegan options everywhere, but they're not necessarily healthy vegan options. There's definitely a lack of greens throughout Asia, like the kale and the big leafy spinach. There's a low appreciation for raw and what we would call the HHI protocol. There's a lower sense of upward mobility, less opportunity. Once an Uber driver, perhaps always an Uber driver. But yet the economies are booming, there's a sense of globalism, and everybody speaks English, but not in Japan. And wherever I go, I took this picture on the way to the office in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Everywhere I go, the people are nice. So this is my slide. You see at the bottom, toward the bottom, that's Japanese. And that says Total Health Vegan Perspective. You see, when I was in Japan and they asked me to speak, they said, after we got everything confirmed, they said, okay, well, you have to meet the day before with our translators. I said, whoa, your translators? Yeah, well, no one speaks English here, so we need a translator. So people, I would say at least a third of this room have seen me speak before. You know that I've used slides. My presentation is slides-based. So right away, I went into a panic because I realized I wouldn't be able to use my slides for the normal talk that I give. So it actually then came to me in my yoga practice, in the yoga class, how I would speak for 45 minutes or so, or in that case, half an hour, without slides. So I came up with this concept. And so at this time, I would like to give that presentation to you. Does that sound like a good idea? I'd like to welcome all of you. How many people are vegans here? So I'd like to welcome the vegans. I also like to welcome the pre-vegans. And I'd also like to welcome the fake carnivores. You see, we were all vegan. Certainly we were born vegan. We're all vegan before we even had the chance to decide for ourselves how to eat. And I think I can prove that. When you were a youngster and you were placed, if they placed you in a crib, not a crib, a playpen. And in that playpen they put a rabbit and they put an apple. Every time without exception. And you and everybody that was ever born, with the rabbit, with the apple, you eat the apple and play with the rabbit. Now I've done 22 lectures in the last 6 months. It's not like I do it full time. But I guess you could say I'm sort of comfortable speaking to groups by now. But the one thing I lay in bed at night worrying about is when I tell the story about the baby, the apple, and the rabbit, I worry about mixing it up, and saying that every time you'll eat the rabbit and play with the apple. But I didn't do that tonight, and so I'm batting 1,000 on that. And so it is. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Total Health from a Vegan Perspective. Because what I'm here talking about right now, I'm not up here chasing butterflies, I'm not up here philosophizing, I'm not even necessarily talking about a diet. Because what does it imply when we go on a diet? It implies we're going to go off the diet, right? So really what we're talking about a lifestyle. But more than a lifestyle, when you consider, as it shows on the screen, when you consider there's actually 5 aspects of human health that have profound consequences. We usually think of our physical health when we think of our health. In large part, that's what Hippocrates does here, although they do recognize the total person. They do have psychotherapists on staff. But beyond our physical health, when you consider our mental health, our spiritual health, our societal health, and our environmental health, when you consider that, really what we're talking about is mankind's next step. Hippocrates Health Institute. Let's go back thousands of years. I'm wearing tonight my American flag, Greek American flag friendship pin. Not just because my last name is Nicozisis and I'm 100% Greek. Not only because it's Greek Easter this week. Did you all know that? Because you have to have Passover before you can have Easter, so we're really the right ones. But Hippocrates, who lived 2,500 years ago, it's called Hippocrates Health Institute because he said, food is your medicine, and medicine is your food. Now, fast forward to today, and it seems like we have a food industry that pays no attention to health, and we have a health industry, we have a medical industrial complex, for the most part, that pays no attention to food. And I used to think, especially when I graduated for the first time here 8 years ago, I used to think, and as I got more and more into the topic, I used to think, gosh, if we could just get, Brian Clement and the integrative health medical doctors and the herbologists and the Reiki healers and the big medical industry and the pharma, if we could just sit all around the table and sort it all out, gosh, and maybe hold hands and sing Kumbaya, maybe we could make things better. But as I got into it, I think we all realized that probably will never happen. And it reminds me of a quote from Upton Sinclair. And Upton Sinclair said, "It's very hard to get a man to understand something when his paycheck depends on his not understanding." Right? It's very hard to get a man to understand something when his paycheck depends on his not understanding. They would have you think that genetics are the determining factor whether or not we get sick. We're as a people, and even as individuals, we're always looking for that magic bullet or that excuse. We're always looking for good news for bad food choices. I have it, my genes. My genes determine that. Well, a family doesn't necessarily share heart disease, they share a menu. They share sausage and peppers. The idea is not to allow the bad genes to express themselves. We need to be obsessed, people. We need to be obsessed with epigenetics. What are epigenetics? That's gene expression as a result of diet and lifestyle. What does that mean? Gene expression as a result of diet and lifestyle. Think of it like a computer. I just read about this the other day. I thought it was a great analogy. The computer has programs, or your iOS smartphone or Android has programs, but the program doesn't determine the output. Right? The program doesn't determine the output. What determines the output? What you type on the keyboard determines the output of the computer. And so it is with our genes. And so, in the poker hand of life, if your gene hand, you were dealt a gene hand where you eat the animal protein, within minutes there's an inflammatory reaction. If it shows up in your bones, it's rheumatoid arthritis. If it shows up in your nerves, it's multiple sclerosis. If you have an autoimmune disorder, you're eating animal protein. Within minutes, it's an insult to the body. And so we're doing this breakfast, lunch, and dinner because we've been born into a culture where somehow under this invisible trance, this invisible ideology that says we need to eat animals to be healthy and strong, that we need to drink their milk to have strong bones. But when it comes to the autoimmune, we're doing this because we've been born into this culture at a certain period of time for whatever reasons. Maybe they needed it to develop their brains 100,000 years ago. I don't know. I think a lot of that's mythologized. I would just say let's just drop the story and deal with the here and the now. So the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, our body always recognizes these proteins, animal proteins, as invaders. So decades down the line, or maybe 5 years, whatever your gene path would have it, your body starts attacking your protein because after a while it can't tell the difference. There's a lot of confusion out there about nutrition. A lot of it's on purpose. The food industry takes a page from the tobacco industry, where they have strategized, all they have to do is confuse people. And we call this checkbook science, that the food company will write a check to the research lab to come up with the conclusion that they want. But it's not like there's two sides of this. It's not like there's big broccoli, putting out studies or you don't see big broccoli on TV. So I'm going to give you 3 principles of health when it comes to our physical health. It's all you ever need to know about nutrition. It sounds like a bridge too far, but once you really understand what I'm going to tell you, these 3 principles of health, everything else you ever read about nutrition is always going to apply to these 3 things. Number 1, All life comes from the sun, therefore eat plants. At Hippocrates, on this buffet, there is nothing more exemplary than that concept right there. All life comes from the sun, therefore eat plants. Number 2, all health centers around the immune system. And number 3, do the things that are good for you and support the immune system, and don't do the things that are bad for you. So number 1, all life comes from the sun, therefore eat plants. A word on the sun. It's composed of photons, photon cells. Did you know that it takes 100,000 years for the photon cell in the middle of the sun to get to the edge of the sun? And then it's expelled as sunlight, and then it takes 8 minutes for the sunlight to get to the sun, to the earth, to go on our skin, to generate vitamin D, to react with the plants. And so about 500 million years ago, these plants started to be created, started to react with the sun through photosynthesis, and over time, about 25,000 known phytochemicals come along that we benefit from, We have this symbiotic relationship with the plants. If they could speak, they would say they're very happy being part of the cycle of life. How do I know this? They speak to me. They give off oxygen. We breathe the oxygen, right? We breathe out CO2. They need CO2. They have phytochemicals that we benefit from, and we have a symbiotic relationship. So the whole thing about the sun and the food is when you eat raw and when you eat sprouts, if you wanted to live like a saint and walk on water, half your diet by weight would be sprouts. And the reason why that is, it's like getting a sunlight transfusion. Dr. Vithi in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, who I became really good friends with, he put it this way. He used 2 words. He called it sunfire. You're eating sunfire, and you're literally getting a sunlight transfusion that has many, many benefits. Well, what do I mean by that? What's the example? That sounds nice and all. Well, let's just take one phytochemical, because we could talk about thousands of them. Most of them we don't even know what they're doing or why what they do is good. Broccoli sprouts, they're on that buffet 6 days a week, not on fasting day. Broccoli sprouts have a chemical called sulforaphane. And sulforaphane is 100 times stronger than regular broccoli. That's why we eat sprouts, by the way, because they have 30, 40, in this case 100 times more nutrition than the best whole vegetable that you would grow in perfect soil in your backyard and ripen at the perfect time and eat it, and you'd still be, in this case, 100 times deficit with broccoli sprouts versus broccoli. So in 1998, Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, a teaching university, they discovered that sulforaphane killed cancer cells, killed cancer tumors, and even killed, one-on-one in a petri dish, cancer stem cells, which chemo and radiation actually promote cancer stem cells. Did you know that 94% of the people that get chemo or radiation die of cancer or they die of the chemo? It doesn't work. Now, I will say this. It seems, especially with the cancer industry, it seems like the money is in the treatment, not the cure. I'm not going to completely bash the medical industrial complex because I think we all agree that they're excellent for interventions and episodes. But all too often, there's money in the treatment and not the cure. So they patented it. It went through the patent court for 6 months. The judge threw it out. The judge said, you cannot patent broccoli sprout. That's like trying to patent air. So then you never heard about sulforaphane again, or you might hear it along the way, but it could not be made into intellectual property. It could not be made into a patent chemical, which we know as prescription drugs, right? So that's sulforaphane. Let's talk about meat. Now, in Asia, vegetarianism is very widespread. So they know not to eat what we call, I'll break it down for you. I like breaking it down this way. The cows, that's big meat. They know not to eat the big meat. And they also know not to eat the little meat, known as chicken. They also know not to eat the pre-meat, known as eggs. Asians don't, for the most part, do not like eggs. Then, I was in Japan, and I asked them, You know not to eat big meat, you know not to eat little meat, you know not to eat pre-meat. Why are we eating swimming meat? And then when I went to Malaysia and I went to Nepal, and they're big vegetarians, it's their culture. It's their thousands of years, in inheritance based on ahimsa, the principle of nonviolence. I asked them, I said, okay, so you know not to eat the big meat, little meat, pre-meat, not big on swimming meat. Why are you eating liquid meat? And they say, well, I'm addicted to cheese, I can't give it up. I said, oh, you mean congealed liquid meat meant for someone else's baby? And they said, I can't give it up. And I said, well, I was thinking I didn't want to, be confrontational, of course, but, cheese has a chemical called casomorphine. Just like the name sounds, well, queso, it's two words. Queso means cheese, and morphine is the morphine. So it's actually addictive to us. It's addicted to the baby cow. It's why it's in there, so that the small animal can turn into a giant beast into a short period of time. It's not for us. But besides that, just like the other meats, it has saturated fat, it has cholesterol, it has, milk in particular, has 24 proteins. All of them are not compatible with us. The one that's the worst one is a big, sticky, yucky protein called casein. And casein has been shown to cause cancer in laboratory rats. Now, of course, we're not rats, but in this case, there's connections because where there's smoke, there's fire. There's lots of studies, a lot of inference that it's linked to invasive prostate cancer, invasive breast cancer. It's sticky, as I said. They actually use casein to stick the labels on bottles. So we're feeding this to our children, and when we feed milk to our children, we actually subject them to elevated risk for type 1 diabetes, and also, as adults, type 2 diabetes. That's the easiest one I see here. I've been coming here for 8 years, and I see people come for 3 weeks with the diabetes cases, the type 2, and by the end of the 3 weeks, we didn't do anything here, or they didn't, Hippocrates didn't, the food did it. They allowed the body, they allowed themselves, their immune system, and they allowed their body to heal themselves. So that's meat versus plants. It's so obvious. So all life comes from the sun, therefore eat plants. Number 2, all health centers around the immune system. The reason why we say eat vegan, the reason why we say exercise, the reason why we say have a good attitude, because all these things boost the immune system. Matter of fact, you can almost forget everything we talked about tonight, because it starts with the brain. You know why? Because the mind existed before the food. Us vegans call this lifestyle, the food, our juice, our wheatgrass, we call it our green shield, because it boosts the immune system. 70% of our immune system, 70% of our serotonin is in our gut. Over half, I'm not sure the percentage, over half of the immune system is in our gut. So if we're eating rotting, decomposing flesh, and all these other things, it freaks the immune system out. As far as I'm concerned, we have a cure for cancer. Not Hippocrates, I'm saying humanity, for free. And it really gets me when I drive around and I see these huge, entire city blocks, these cancer centers. And all they got to do is support the immune system. We have a cure for cancer. It's called the immune system. Number 3, do the things that support the immune system. Do the things that are good for you. Don't do the things that are bad for you. That's simple one, but that's not easy. Simple, but not easy. So that's our physical health. And when we come to Hippocrates, many of us are up against the wall with chronic or catastrophic diseases. And many people over the 61, 62-year history end up halting, reversing, and resolving catastrophic diseases with a switch to a plant-based diet. And when you do that, you're doing it for yourself. And that's what I call veganism through the side door. And it's very natural. It's also very natural when you do it for yourself It's also very natural to drift away. Once you conquer the disease, it's just human nature. And I actually went down this path myself. Once you conquer the disease, you end up having cheat days. You end up introducing things into your diet, maybe this animal product or that animal product. Before you know it, you're right back to where you started from. But veganism through the front door, that's what it's all about. That's what the rest of the talk tonight is about. Veganism through the front door is when you realize there's a deeper meaning than just you, that it's not just about you. It's when you realize that we're all connected and that life is a beautiful tapestry of interconnectedness, that you would never want to impose violence. You never want to be part of that system, especially when these animals were designed, put on this earth to live celebratory and purposeful lives. Many people would have a hard time understanding that. Live celebratory and purposeful lives. You see, what's important to them is like what's important to us. And we certainly wouldn't want to have done to us what goes on there. It's so scary that if you showed your children where their chicken nuggets come from, they would be freaked out. They would have nightmares for weeks, if not longer than that. And I would just ask you, what kind of food system would offer that at this point in time? It's just so unnecessary. It's so wrong. So veganism through the front door involves our mental health. So we usually think of our physical health. We get that. But how about our mental health? Because what are we eating when we're eating animal foods? You know what we're eating? When we're eating meat, eggs, fish, chicken, cheese, eggs. I said eggs, right? You know what we're eating? We're eating attitudes. We're eating attitudes of domination. We're eating attitudes of exploitation. We're eating attitudes of hard-heartedness. We're eating attitudes of the rough handling. We're eating attitudes of exclusion. Somehow we've excluded the animals, the food animals, from our sphere of compassion. But we consider the family dog like a member of the family. And you know why that you do? You know why you consider the dog a member of your family? Because when you look into the eyes of that dog, you look into the eyes of any animal, you know there's someone in there. And so we've somehow allowed ourselves to be disconnected from what's going on there. It's so bad, the treatment, that on the factory farm, it's so bad. They have to give the animals drugs for depression, anxiety, and sleeplessness. And then what happens? Especially here in these United States of America, we go to the doctor for what? Depression, anxiety, and sleeplessness, and get pills for that. So there's this connection. But let's talk about plants. As I referred to a few moments ago, 70% of our serotonin is in our gut. So if we're eating plants, we're doing happy time. It's happy time for our body. If we're eating meat, we're introducing that bad bacteria. And it literally will affect our mood, our mental health. The consequences of our food choices have a profound effect on our mental state. But then what about our spiritual health? What about our spiritual health? A word on religion. I'm not a holy person. I'm not a sage. I'm not a preacher, and I'm not going to preach to you. But I have a question regarding religion. And my question is simply this: why aren't the leaders of our respective religions, why aren't they teaching the original teachings of that religion? You get that? Why aren't they teaching the actual teachings? So when I was in Asia, I could go anywhere in Asia to a restaurant and ask for a Buddhist meal. And they would know what that is. That's basically vegan. Buddha not only was a vegan, but also, promoted the idea of not causing harm and violence. And then I went to Thailand, and that's Buddhism, India, ahimsa. The Hindu religion has ahimsa, which is the principle of nonviolence. And then the Jews and the Christians have thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. But that's religion. So my question is, again, why aren't they teaching it? Whatever the story, I think we should just drop the story, and we need to update things. But that's religion. What about spirituality? When you think about it, we are nice to each other. We are nice to people. We are nice to each other because the other person can retaliate. And I have an analogy that I discovered in real life with Uber. How many people have been in an Uber car? Used Uber, have used Uber, heard of Uber? So if you have an Uber account, you know that there's a rating system. There's a star system. The driver has a 5-star rating, up to 5, and then you as the customer have 1 to 5-star rating. So everybody sees everybody else's rating. So if you notice, when you get in the car's super clean. He asks you if you want bottled water. He offers you a mint. He's super nice to you because he wants those 5 stars, baby. And then me, I'm super nice to him too. As a matter of fact, the number one thing that Uber drivers complain about, where they deduct the stars from the people on a ride, on a given ride, is when they slam the door. So I actually have this little like ballet act where I get out and they just like closed it really nicely so he knows that closing it just nice and gingerly, no slam, and I want the 5 stars. So we're nice to people because the other person can retaliate. That's the idea. But to me, the spiritual breakthrough occurs when we honor and respect life, sentient beings who feel pain, who have emotions just like we do, namely the food animals, when we honor and respect them when they can't retaliate, that we hold them in their hand, and then what are we going to do? Are we going to hold them up and honor and respect them because they were meant to live celebratory, purposeful lives? Or are we going to put them down with rough handling and hard-heartedness? So the spiritual breakthrough is when you realize that all life is a tapestry, beautiful tapestry of interconnectedness. And we treat others well and right and properly when they cannot retaliate. So our societal health. Besides Hippocrates, there's another dead white European male, a dwemm, call them dwemms, who espoused veganism thousands of years ago. Imagine if you had an idea that was so good that it was remembered thousands of years later. I'm lucky if my ideas last until tomorrow or next week, and I'm sure you can understand and relate to that. So, besides Hippocrates' idea, then this man, Pythagoras, which if you took geometry class, you had the Pythagorean theorem, right? Pythagorean theorem. Well, he was also a philosopher, and he said that so long, I'll paraphrase and I'll give you the exact quote. So long as mankind kills animals, mankind in society, context, mankind will kill each other. And what he said exactly was, he who sows the seeds of murder and pain will never feel happiness, love, and joy. So, and in more modern times, Leo Tolstoy said, so long as there are battlefields, there will be slaughterhouses. So about 10,000 years ago, this happened. What happened? Before 10,000 years, the animals essentially were mysterious co-passengers on this planet. And so, starting with the domestication of animals that you might have learned it as, we started herding animals and holding them against their will. And this was the first wealth creation. This was the first wealth creation. As a matter of fact, the word per capita means per head of cattle. The very word capitalism comes from the idea of reducing the sentient beings into things. Why do you think they call it the stock market? And the fancy English word pecuniary. I was really bad in my SATs, and I'm sure I got that one wrong, but I learned it more recently in the vegan movement. The word pecuniary means, translated in Latin, means animal. So, when you wanted to create wealth, I love that phrase back in the day. It could mean like 5 years ago, it could mean 8,000 years ago. You wanted to create wealth. What did you do? The first institution, actually there's two institutions that are a direct result of animal agriculture. Two institutions that have caused pain for mankind that are direct consequence of animal agriculture. First institution is armed conflict, war. Because when you wanted to create wealth, you went to war to take the other rich person's or king's cows. Matter of fact, the Sanskrit, the Indian word for war, means the desire for more cows. You know, I think we have to appreciate that we're living in an age where voluntary exchange is the order of the day, where you can think of an idea, think of a product like Uber and be a billionaire. You could sell WhatsApp. You guys have WhatsApp? It was sold for $300 million per employee. Okay, so it was more virtuous up until fairly recently to steal people's things than it was to create an idea and engage in voluntary exchange. And so when you went to war to take the other person's cows, and if you went to war and you did not die in battle and you lost, the second institution, direct result of animal agriculture, slavery. So again, I'm not just up here chasing butterflies talking about philosophy. I'm here saying that the world is screwed up because we eat animals. That perhaps the opposite, plant-based living, is perhaps the master key for a lot of the world's problems. So when you fast forward to today, you know, we're not fighting over cows, obviously, with armed conflict, right? But it's that mentality of reducing. What do we do with our enemies? We reduce them. We give them names. We think they're less special than us. We think they're subject to, they deserve it, that they're not quite human. So this is mentality that still lives with us. Our societal health is profoundly affected by our food choices. And lastly, our environmental health. Everybody, I think, gets this. Even the non-veg people understand this. How many people have seen Cowspiracy? Cowspiracy, okay. So you can go to cowspiracy.com. James Cameron, famous movie producer, he said the single thing that is most devastating to the environment is animal agriculture. There's a lot of facts and figures, I'll just give you a few. It's a very wasteful system to grow animal foods and to distribute them throughout the world. The ratio is actually 15 times land, water, and resources for animals than plants. It's a 15-to-1 ratio. In the United States, over half of the municipal water goes to feed the animals. Then we have droughts. We have declared droughts in places like California, and you can't water your lawn, you can't wash your car. Then they force these toilets on us, but you have to flush 3 times just to do your business. Now, how do I know this? Because once you turn vegan, you realize you've been constipated your whole life. You didn't even know that you've been constipated your whole life until you turn vegan. Over 45% of the United States covered with grazing fields or areas needed for livestock. They have to cut down these fields, which also displaces and kills not just the food animals, but the animals that are living in the natural habitat of the forest that were chopped down, so that they can grow monocrops, grain, and about 800 million people a year, starve every year to go to feed the animals. We could be somehow setting up a system to feed the grain to those people, but it goes to feed the animals. So that these billion people over here, that's us, can eat and get sick. It's a totally screwed up system. You see that, right? And I would call it an evil system. So that's our environmental health. So now we'll wrap it up and maybe we have some questions or comments, but I want to say this. This to me is the best part about all of this. This is all really good news because it doesn't have to be this way. It'd be one thing if we needed to eat the animals to be healthy and strong, right? Or if we needed them for one reason or another. But we don't. And if we think we do, we should just drop the story because people are always looking for good news for bad food choices. So it's good news, but more importantly, I've come to understand the vegan lifestyle as a liberation. It's a way out. It's a way out. It's like walking through a different door than the doors we've been previously shown. And the price to pay to walk through that door is we give up the animal products. But as I've traveled around the world in the last 6 months, 10 countries, living in 6 cities, I have been blown away by the abundance and the variety and the unending variety of the vegan, all the vegan food, whether it was Indian, the sauces and the spices, or the root vegetables in Japan, or the mock meats in Thailand, which were created hundreds and hundreds of years ago by the monks because they had their rich patrons coming to the monastery. And so, we've only really been animal focused in our food for about 100 years as a world because people couldn't afford it. So a lot of the rich people through history ate the meat. So they actually came up with these mock meats in the monasteries to satisfy the rich patrons. So it's really no price to pay to walk through that door. All the values that we as humans hold dear, like equality, justice, compassion, respect for females, somehow, and some people, maybe in this room, might have majored in gender studies in college. And somehow the exactly opposite is on our plate. So we can have peace, but we have to be willing to give the peace. How can you ask for something you're not willing to give? How can you pray for something and then moments later dine on pain, misery, fear, and suffering? It's inconsistent. It doesn't make sense, and it won't work. So finally, there's a thing in business called the elevator pitch. Have you guys heard that? The elevator pitch. So the elevator pitch is when you have a great idea, but you don't have all day or even 2 minutes to pitch, perhaps a prospect or maybe even your boss or the CEO. So people, if somebody asks me an elevator pitch for why should they be vegan? So I get in the elevator right now and and a guy sees me, he knows me from before. He says, "Hey, you're the vegan." And yeah. So you know how he knows that, right? He knew I was vegan because don't worry, someone will tell you they're a vegan if you didn't know ahead of time. Hi, I'm Phil, I'm a vegan. You're the vegan, right? Tell me, why should I be vegan? Sir, and by the way, we have 10 stories now. Beep, beep, beep. Sir, I'm just so happy. I'm happy. I won't say happy. I'll just say, I'm so happy. I found a lifestyle. I found a diet where I feel better, I look better. I feel that we'll have a better society, and certainly we will probably save all the problems in the environment. I'm just so happy I found this diet and lifestyle. It's working for me, and I think it'll work for everybody else. And he gets off the elevator. So maybe we didn't sell him at that point, but we, excuse the pun, but we planted the seed. And by the way, that's, in large part, that's how a lot of people come around to this. I see my parents are here. They have been hearing me talk about this for years, and then they went to Hippocrates last year, become vegan, and they're still very much vegan. So these things happen slowly. So that's the elevator pitch. Then there's this, what I call the staircase pitch. So the elevator's broken on that day. The elevator's broken. And so that same guy is running down the stairs for a meeting. And I'm like chill, I don't run for nobody. I'm on my coffee break. I'm chilling, I'm walking up the stairs. He says, "Oh, the vegan guy, hey, why should I be vegan?" And then I go, "Because nothing tastes as good as vegan feels." So I say to you, nothing tastes as good as vegan feels. That's my staircase close. So can we say that together on the count of 3? Nothing tastes as good as vegan feels. 1, 2, 3. Nothing tastes as good as vegan feels. Ladies and gentlemen, that's total health from a vegan perspective. Thank you so much for listening tonight. Okay, any questions or comments? Or I know I guess I spoke for just under an hour. So you, the lady in the back, how's your voice? Do you want to speak loudly or do you want to? Actually, can somebody help run the microphone for me? Who wants to do some exercise? Let's do that. Mandy, yeah, Mandy, you're good at that. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
So I have a friend, a very close friend of mine, who's a butcher, and does this for a living.
Okay.
And I plan on going home and sharing. I mean, people want to know what I'm doing, and I don't want to like slander her business or hurt her or upset her in any way.
It's a her, it's a lady.
Well, it's a husband and wife, and this is what they do for a living.
Yeah.
This is what they've always done for a living. What do I do?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I wouldn't say what I'm going to say, but this is it's a medical fact. If you're, I mean, this is like interesting that you actually have this friend and you're presenting me this scenario. You can go to Rohan Wilson's book, Why Animals Aren't Food. It's an A to Z encyclopedia of all the diseases that are out there in the world, and 90% of them are animal protein related. So if you are married to a butcher, if you're the spouse of a butcher, you have a highly elevated risk of getting cervical cancer due to butcher's warts. It's called butcher's warts, and the females can get it from their spouse. I'll leave it to you whether or not you want to share that. You might want to read up on it a little bit more. But as far as, this whole thing, it's not just them. It's how do I think what the bigger question, if I could maybe infer, is this. Me and the other vegans here, we're vegans in a not yet vegan world. So, this is the world we're born into. And so I'm not up here or anywhere else I speak, talking down or even lecturing or however you want to say it, like condescending or something. Because if I'm up here saying, let's expand our sphere of compassion that we already have for life and for our dogs and our pets and so on, let's expand it to the food animals. I'm also expanding my sphere of compassion to people who haven't made the connection yet. And so, I don't know those people, but maybe you can plant. Like I said, I think a lot of these things are slow. The seeds get planted. So, good luck with that. Maybe you can report back to us how you've how it's working out with your relationship.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's Manny with the microphone. Who else? Lou, you can speak without your voice is loud. You get the microphone.
You mentioned.
This is my dad.
Actually, I'm his older brother. You mentioned mock meat.
Mock meat.
Yes. And today we were at a grocery store.
Yes.
And I'm going through their frozen food section, and I saw meatless meatballs, chickenless meatballs. Anyway, these are, I take it, plant-based stuff that is supposed to taste like meat and so on. Maybe feel like meat when you chew it, but they are processed. Let me know how healthy or unhealthy stuff like that.
Okay, so the party line, we're at Hippocrates. You'll never see those products on the buffet.
I know, I've never seen them.
You'll never see. So, but Brian has been asked the same question, the director here, the co-director with his wife. Brian will say, these foods are like a bridge. If we can get somebody to stop eating animal products and get them to, replace it with the mock meat and then also eat the vegetables. And, we've done, if everybody's vegan and we're arguing over if we should be eating mock meat or not, the world has changed for the better. That's my heck. But on a scientific level, food flesh has about 15 times the pesticides. If it's not organic, food flesh has 15 times more pesticides than plant pesticide. You can also wash off the plants when you buy them at the grocery store. And I gotta believe at the factory they're washing them off. But not all mock meats. Some mock meats are more naughty than others. Some of them have isolated fats that we call it frankenfood. You take something from here, you take something from there, and you combine it, and it tastes wonderful. But so if you're vegan and you're like doing that, if it's just part of your plate, I think that's a sustainable lifestyle. There's only been, I've heard this, Andy, you guys know Andy Roman? He's the psychotherapist here. He likes to say that there's only 3 people he's ever known that have ever been able to do the Hippocrates diet, or the, I'll call it protocol. You know, fasting every Wednesday, wheatgrass in the morning, wheatgrass in the afternoon, juicing in the morning, juicing in the afternoon, 50% of your diet by way of sprouts, completely raw, and just eating like a saint. There's only been 3 people he's ever known that can do that. He doesn't name them. I know one of them is Adventurous, who's the co-founder of here. And he's a fantastic, he's a sage is what he is. But thanks for your question. Anybody else? Manny, you got the microphone. Then Dr. Hellman in the back. Go ahead, Manny.
So I'm sure I could find this online, but where do you buy broccoli sprouts?
Right here at the store, the Hippocrates store, the seeds. But if you want them already sprouted, because there's a certain way to do it. Got Sprouts is the local sprout distributor. They were health educators here, and they went out and they created this beautiful business. They deliver, and they sell all the sprouts by the pound, already done. They also sell the wheatgrass by the pound, and they even have a sprout mix. They sell the machines. They have their stores right off 95. It's called Got Sprouts. I'll give you their number. You know, okay, good. That's your source. Okay, Dr. Hellman in the back.
Yeah, so.
And I just want to introduce you, Josh. Josh is the medical director here at Hippocrates. He's been here, 2 months now? And came from the west coast of Florida. I met him 3 years ago at a conference called Freedom Fest in Las Vegas. And he has a trauma center background, a trauma background, so you know he's the real deal. And then he also had a practice where he was plant-based. He had a plant-based minded practice. And Brian, I guess, gave him an offer he couldn't refuse, and he's relocated his whole life, and he's dived in here, and everybody loves him so far. So that's Dr. Hellman. Go ahead, what's your question?
Thank you so much. And we feel honored that you decided to come back here, I know maybe the IRS was part of it, but to come back here and speak
I just kept telling him, take me off your mailing list. He wouldn't do it.
So I'm curious, in all your travels and in all your lectures, what has been the most difficult question or the most confrontational situation you've been in?
Okay, so there was a lady in one of the gatherings in Kuala Lumpur. She wasn't vegan, and she was a affluent person. Because she dressed the part, but then she would afterwards she was telling about the travels she was doing, and she was and there's not a lot of wealthy people in these places, so she kind of stood out. She was convinced, she wasn't vegan, she was convinced that cooking food was good, and that it was necessary that there were some foods that you had to cook in order to bring out certain chemicals, like the tomato myth. What's that chemical in tomatoes? Right. And so she gave me the stink eye the whole time, and she kept shaking her head. And I tried to tell her about hormones, oxygen, vitamins, nutrients, enzymes. Hope. When we cook the food, we lose HOPE. That's why we don't cook, the kitchen here doesn't cook the food, because you kill hormones, oxygen, phytonutrients, and enzymes. The vital things that are most important for food. What is the purpose of food? Besides breaking bread together and fellowship, but I have to worry about that. The purpose of the food really is for fuel and life force. The rest is just window dressing. But even having said that about the fellowship part, imagine if we all had to sit down at a table or stand in a room without food or drink. That would be like a real connection. That we wouldn't be distracted and just talking about the food. We'd be talking about real things. So I think even some of that is mythologized a little bit. Thank you. Anybody else? In the back, okay. Sleeping on the job, man. Okay.
How about the cats and the dogs? Why all the supermarket, even the organic supermarket, has meat and animal product for those small
Is your question, what about dogs eat, or
Why
animals?
they feed them, yes, why they feed them meat?
Why do we feed our domestic pets meat?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, not everybody does. There's a, you know, some vegans in the vegan movement are really hardcore. Some of them, you know, will not buy a car with leather. Some of them will not, like for me, I don't wear leather. Whether I don't wear leather shoes, I don't wear leather boots, but I'm wearing a wool suit. So, you know, you draw the line somewhere. But so a lot of vegan pet owners will feed their animals vegan food. But explain that away for the time being, because that's not necessarily normal. I say everything by design. These animals have a physiology for meat. I didn't get into it in my formal presentation, but since you bring it up, I'll tell you right now. We have a physiology for plants. We have a digestive system that's 4 times longer than the dog, 4 times longer than the hyena, the lion. Because so when we eat plants, the phytonutrients can get sucked up and benefit, and the cells can grab it all. When we eat the meat, that cavernous digestive system allows the cholesterol to get sucked up, and the saturated fat to get sucked up into our bodies. So in our mouths, we have these short little teeth made for grinding. And these things right here, these so-called canines, you know what they are? They're KEYNOTEs. They're canine in name only. They're not real canines. So in our mouth, and so the apex predator with the fangs, the mouth goes up and down to rip the flesh. So whatever they eat, they don't have free will. They just have their design. So if they're designed to eat meat, they're designed to eat meat. We're not. If you see an injured animal on the side of the road, your first inclination is to help the injured animal. But if you were a real carnivore, not a fake carnivore with fake canine teeth, you would use that opportunity for that scenario for a meal. So I would say everything according to design.
So what the right things then to feed the cat and the dogs? Meat or a vegetable?
What's your
Because
question?
you said they designed to eat meat. And then you said a vegan person, they don't
Some
feed
of them
the
don't.
animals
They're very healthy.
where is it healthy because they designed, you said they designed to eat meat, not to eat vegetable. So is it healthy to feed them vegetable?
It can be, yes, absolutely.
Can be.
Yep.
Thank you.
Especially algae. You can feed your dog algae and it would live fine. Certain edible algae. Anybody else? This lady over here.
I don't make the mic.
Okay, yeah.
We do the wheatgrass, we go to Universal, but we also started with the raw spirulina.
Right, from Tim in Georgiana.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get it. I
Is
get
that
it.
something that we should eat on a regular
I
basis?
listen. I'm
We didn't hear
traveling right
that.
now. I have not been able to eat the raw living spirulina. It's called. But I have it this week. I've been eating tons of it. So the institute here, Brian he likes algae. He eats 5 algae a day, he'll tell you. He doesn't like the raw one because he says it could have bad bacteria.
That's what
Now, I've been eating their specific product for 2 years now, and I've never had any kind of bad bacteria. But the algae are very good food. It's the original superfood. It actually existed before oxygen. Can you imagine? And that particular spirulina has every vitamin and mineral that we know about.
Right.
And it's 50% protein. And so I love it and I recommend it, but the party line here says they won't carry that.
Well, how do you know if it has bad bacteria by
But
the taste?
listen, what is all science is observation. So trial by doing it. You know, if you have a bad day on the toilet, I guess it was not a good idea. Anybody else? Man, you got it.
Thank you.
The lady in the red dress in the back, and then I guess maybe one more question. Yeah.
What about the coffee? Would you have a coffee in the morning? Is it okay, not okay? Or which one is the healthier version of coffee?
Okay, so also, you asked me if I drink wine. I get asked this, do you drink coffee? Do you drink wine? So I'm a vegan. I'm not a saint, right? And so I love coffee, but it doesn't love me. I love that little jolt, and I'll get into the science, but I get a crash. Brian has given presentations, Brian Clement, that coffee can lead to depression. There's been some studies on that. Short-term memory loss, and actually, like today, like this week, I did not have caffeine because I knew I was speaking. Because I know if I get too jazzed up on coffee, I can't think straight, basically. And so, caffeine is a powerful psychoactive drug. It's also the one drug you don't build a tolerance to. And as far as wine goes, in Kuala Lumpur, because of their alcohol situation, I decided to completely go dry, and that was, that was a big feeling. So, I'm a vegan, not a saint, and that's kind of where that
Or you
is.
have coffee sometimes.
Anybody else? Okay, all right, one more question.
Okay, I was just told that this is not good. I drink kombucha twice a day, in the morning and at night, and I mean.
Okay, so the thing about kombucha, Brian hates kombucha. It's not on the property. He says it's filled with sugar and that it will eat you from the inside out. Now, here's the thing. If it's a good kombucha, you have to look at the sugar content. And so the one that you have there is also, it's like pasteurized, so it's not raw. You gotta go to my recommendation. Moe's kombucha, they have it at the Be Organic. Do you ever hear of Moe's? It's a brand, it's owned by a health educator here, good friend of mine, Walter Riley. And it's raw, and it's like, you can feel it, like it's got probiotics. It's got like 40 different strains of probiotics. So, most of them are junk. If you find a good one that's low in sugar, I would recommend it. All right, maybe one more question. I'm having too much fun. I think we did it. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.